Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial's correctly set correctly to USA Prepares. We're having some technical difficulties this morning. About 3 or 4 seconds just before the broadcast started, we found out that we have to install a new version of Skype so that Dr. Richard Allen Miller can connect with us. So we are feverishly working on having Rick Miller connect with us. So for those of you detractors who think that Skype is a really great product, here's a perfect example of why we say it's not a great product. For those of you who think that Microsoft is doing a great job with ever-increasing numbers of Skype updates that work worse and worse and worse than the previous Skype update, it's unbelievable. I don't think you... Oh, okay. Well, so we are rebooting. But in my case, here at the farm, I can't use Skype. I can't because the version of Windows that I have is no longer supports Skype. Can you imagine that? It used to work fine. I can launch it, but Microsoft doesn't allow me to use my version of Skype because they have a new, improved version. Imagine that. Imagine having software that you think you own, but you really don't. You're just licensing the use of it. So you don't own it, but you do pay for it. It is defective, and then you have to get ever-increasing versions of more and more defects in the software. And the proof of that is Windows 3.1, the early version of Windows, then Windows 95, 95A, 95B, 95C, Windows 98, Windows 98 second edition, Millennium, XP 2000, the list goes on, right? And what happens every time you get a new version? You go, geez, this computer's getting slow. I guess we need to upgrade the processor and the memory. Yeah, and so there you go with what it's like with this ever-changing software. And it's annoying. It really is annoying because they keep changing the operating system, and then the operating system requires different versions of the applications, and it's a vicious cycle, and it's an expensive cycle. But here we are, and we allow this to happen to us. Because people just keep buying new computers. And where do the old computers go anyway? I'm willing to bet most of them are in mountains. Mountains of trash, along with washing machines and dryers. And why is it? Why is it that we don't have a government corporation that says, you know what? We're building mountains of trash. Mountains of trash from Asia that include old VCRs. Remember them? Betamax, remember them? How about the DVD players that fail after a few years? How about the TVs that fail after a few years? And do you bring them to the TV store to have them fixed? No. You throw them away. Why? Because it costs more to fix them than they're worth. So where do they go? In the mountain of trash. Same thing with washing machines and dryers. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if we all threw out our refrigerators? What a big pile that would be? Well, actually, we all have thrown out refrigerators. And they're in that pile. Why don't we recycle this stuff? Why don't we... I believe... I was having this discussion with someone here at the farm. that I believe that when RCA owned Whirlpool, the appliance manufacturer, we had an RCA Whirlpool refrigerator back in the 1960s when I was growing up. That refrigerator, I believe, if someone didn't just say, you know what, I don't like the style, because we sold the house that it was in and we left the refrigerator with the house. It worked great. If someone didn't just say, you know what, I just don't like the style or the color, I need a new one, just for vanity's sake, I'll bet you that thing is still running. But is that the case with the new refrigerators? Hardly. Hardly. New appliances don't last very long. Do we have Rick Miller with us?
Yes, we do.
Hey, Rick. So I'm on this rant about appliances. I'm on this rant about making a mountain, actually many mountains, probably thousands of mountains of trash, because we're too stupid to build appliances.
The whole
electronic
thing
devices
has
that would
been
last.
leading to this. Yeah, the whole thing has been leading to this single moment when they are just now about to launch the beginning of an earth fence. And I'm concerned. You and I have talked about this in terms of appliances and conveniences and where technology goes and the options we have of why we want to go to the right over the left. And Lockheed has just won a contract to beat out Boeing and others on what is called the earth fence, or it's like a defense missile system, except that this makes Star Wars a toy for Nintendo. This system allows what happened in paradise is our future if we allow this to happen today. And there's only one thing to do, and that is, from congressional point of view, of banning this technology from America. Now, the bad news is the globalists don't care, because even if Boeing and Lockheed do not participate, China will, and it'll be for Africa, or Africa will. Once this system is up, it's a globalist system rather than a nationalist system. It will be able to do everything from space. And that's what the space race originally was all about. Who gets there first is the one that gets to claim the prize. And we are at a crossroads, and every single person listening to my voice right now, the reason the military used me for four decades is because I could see ahead by 20 years, and we are in deep trouble. Paradise, right now, PG&A is going to court for murder. It's happening. It's in the news. You can find it anywhere on the media, in between the lines. Why the primary news is not covering this? You go answer your own question on why that's about to happen. Now, Lockheed, I remember when Pacific Power came up my drive last month to put my smart meter in, and I sent him on his way. He tried to threaten me. They're going to threaten businesses for not participating in this with lawsuits. And what's going to happen is they're going to force it on us, whether we want it or not. And that item has the precision of taking an individual screw and heating it from the inside out and causing your house to burn down with all the nails that are in it. That is exactly what happened in Paradise. The blue light, lasers, particle beam weapons, no, they weren't. What that was the radiation leaping from one smart meter to the next, and you could see it from space as it ignited one house after the other. And that is the technology that they are now wanting to put in space to control Earth, not Paradise, California.
Rick, as you said
could say that Paradise was a beta test on how well the weapon worked. Oh, we were able to take out all the houses and leave the shrubbery. We could slag a car in the middle of the street. There's only one thing that will cause that kind of a thing, and that's a plasma. When you can slag glass, the only temperatures that get that high are from microwave. There it is.
Rick, as you were saying that, I was leaning back in my seat, looking out the window of the studio, looking over the farm. I was thinking of two things. One, when you're talking about heating up an individual screw in the house. Now, where are those screws? They're all over.
They're in everything. Yeah, right. They're in everything, yeah.
And why an individual screw? Is it because the individual screw is close to a single wavelength of these waves, if you will? Is that what it is? Or is it two wavelengths, or is it a multiple of the wavelengths? I think the answer is yes. And here's another. As I was looking out the window, I was looking at some fencing. And right outside the studio window is what's called fence tape. Fence tape is about a half an inch wide. The kind that we use is white in color, and it has between 5 and 6 woven stainless steel threads through this polyester tape. And it lasts years and years and years. And what happens is you connect an electric fence charger to it, and it sends a pulse of maybe 4,000 volts, very few amperes. It just shocks an animal, much like if you got a static shock from something fuzzy in the wintertime. It'd be just like that, okay? It's enough to tell the animal, you know what, this isn't really a good idea because it might happen again. It's much more kind to the animals to keep them in the area that you want than barbed wire, for example. They can see the electric fence tape because it's white. It's very hard to miss. And the cows, our cows, know that, well, they probably won't like rubbing up against it. Well, I was thinking about what you were saying, and these frequencies can hop on this fence and start fires. And how long are these fences? Well, a roll of electric fence tape is roughly 660 feet. And then you put multiples together. We have this stuff running for miles. And it's one great big antenna, the way they would want to use it. The way we want to use it is just simply electric fence tape. It's portable. You can put up a fence by stepping in posts into the ground, insulated posts, and step them in and put them where you want them. Unroll the fence tape, and there you've got a fence. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. Class, if you'd like to look him up at DocRamCom, DocRamCom. Rick, is that on Facebook?
Yeah, that's facebook.com/DocRam.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have Facebook, so it's I can't.
That's where I post. What I do each day is I open email from everybody and I read what their concerns and questions are. And then when I post those more pertinent ones on Facebook that I found interesting, this is how I stay current with radio. And that is reflected on my normal website, richardallenmiller.com. Over on the right-hand side, there's two scrolls for Facebook. I have Sustainable Lifeboat, and I have DocRamCom, plus my more personal one. So I actually have 3 accounts. And then I also have Twitter, and I have YouTube. And I have now my new YouTube account, and now I'm just opening Vimeo on tribute to Matt Stein, who died 2 weeks ago. And Matt and I have a bunch of videos on survival. I have some terrible news to say. Basically, yesterday, I went out into my community and I visited all of the different police. That's the county, that's the local, and the Oregon State Police. I went to the National Guard. That's an interesting one. Offering my services for free to offer sustainable lifeboats messages and workshops for the community, and not one, including the Chamber of Commerce, not one single person in any of those organizations wanted to do anything with me.
Huh.
It's unbelievable. I looked at the Chamber of Commerce woman and I said, I taught 11 years at Harvard, and Rogue Community College does not want me to teach a course in agriculture. I said, I'll do it for free. Now, that is my community with a high school graduation course of 73%. And that says something about my community. And when I look at this stuff going on with 5J, I'm appalled.
I agree. Mark in Illinois is waiting. Mark, just stand by for just another minute or so, and we'll put you on. I've got a comment that I'd like to make. Rick Miller, that's exactly the same thing that happened to me here in the corrupt state of Missouri for Expo number 1. I called, this is like 7 years ago, I called the Missouri National Guard. Oh, we'd love it. This is great. We'll teach people what we do. This is awesome. I called the Civil Air Patrol. This is great. We'll teach people what we do. We'll have more members in our little club. I called the Red Cross. This is great. We'll bring our robot and we'll teach people how to apply first aid techniques. This is great. And then just before the expo, on the same day, they all pulled out. Because they were told, and one guy let it slip. I said, what's up with the National Guard? I met this guy for lunch. He was in uniform. He even gave me a backpack that said National Guard on it. So if this guy was committed, he was going to bring his guys. They were really looking forward to it. It was going to be wonderful. And he let it slip. I said, well, now we got scheduling problems.
Let me say this. I went to the National Guard in Merlin, and guess what? The first thing I noticed is the flagpole doesn't have a flag flying. They had it draped around a chair inside the door. Then we knocked on the door. They had a buzzer to be let in. There were cars parked all around the building, all four sides of the building. There were 12 doors. Every single one of them was locked. There was no lights on, and they wouldn't let me in to talk to them. That's our National Guard in Merlin.
Well, we can talk more about that, and we can talk about the Red Cross, and we can talk about the Civil Air Patrol, because I talked to all three of them, and all three of those organizations were excited about coming until one day they weren't excited anymore, all on the same day. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, class. So Red Cross, they were going to come to the Get Prepared Expo number 1 about 7 years ago, and they decided at the last minute they weren't going to make it. They were all excited about making it. They're all excited about the presentation. They're all excited about teaching people how to apply first aid techniques. They pulled out at the last minute. On the same day, the National Guard pulled out. Same day. And the Civil Air Patrol pulled out as well. All three were excited about being there. I was giving them free space so they get their message across. I thought it was the right thing to do. Well, they got the message from Washington, D.C. Stand down. Do not go to the Get Prepared Expo. So what do I see on TV? So they've got this guy, now I'm paraphrasing this, on television in the Springfield, Missouri area, and he is the spokesperson, the mouthpiece for emergency management, the guy that you should look up to because he is the government corporation expert. And he gets more time than we get. So we've got this event. They bring the cameras. They look at the generators. They look at the radiation detection equipment. They look at all these cool things that we have to protect you from whatever may happen. Okay? The cameras spend an hour or more. They've got their talent person describing this event. It was the biggest event of its kind in this part of the country. So the TV then flashes from us to this guy from emergency management. And what does he say? I'm paraphrasing, something like this. Well, I guess, if you want to have, people want to have a flashlight and a couple batteries, that's okay. That's the government corporation's response. That is to make it seem like what we just saw on television with learning about what you need to consider, having the knowledge and the tools and the equipment and the spare parts as the attack on us. Well, I guess it's okay if, you have a flashlight and some batteries. That's the government corporation's response to us and what we're doing. They wouldn't even allow the Civil Air Patrol, the Red Cross, nor the National Guard to attend. They were told to stand down. They slipped, and that's how I know that the word came from Washington, D.C. Mark in Illinois, welcome. You're on with Dr. Richard Allen Miller.
Yeah, hey, good morning. I don't think the government has a clue of what's getting ready to happen. I personally think that. I think they assume that they think they know, like a lot of Christians assume.
Hold it, Mark. What do you mean you don't think the government has a clue? Do you mean the local boys and girls who are kept in the dark, that get their paycheck, that have these government corporation jobs to keep them off the street? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean at the top level of the insidious, evil people who are running the show? What do you mean?
Everything's compartmentalized, and all these different compartments or departments, they just don't understand. They don't believe what's getting ready to happen. You can tell them that there's comets. You can tell them that there's solar winds. You can tell them that there's going to be great earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and tidal waves and everything happening all at the same time, and they don't believe it.
Well, of course they don't. Of course they don't, because they're not very smart. Who says you have to be smart to have a low-level government job? Who says you have to be very smart to be a cop? Who says you have to be very smart to work for the Soil and Water Conservation District? Who says?
Well, I had a question.
You don't.
Yeah. I had a couple questions for Doc Ram. He said he taught the Torah at Harvard. And if you look at Genesis chapter 1, speaking of past events and what we're dealing with in the current time, but in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, it says, "And the earth was without form." If you read that verse, it's connected with Jeremiah chapter 4, and it says, "And I looked on the earth," Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 24, "I looked on the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and on the heavens, and they had no light. And I looked on the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills were scattered." If you read these 5 verses, actually you read that 23 to 26 verse in Jeremiah chapter 4, you're seeing that this is talking about an extinction level event, probably a nuclear war that happened on the earth. And if we believe that the earth is about 8.5 billion years old, then we have to think, when did this happen? Because God had already created the heavens and the earth, but this event happened upon the earth that prophet Jeremiah is recording it in his book, Jeremiah 4, and it is the Hebrew words are tohu and bohu, and the connecting point is the tohu vabohu. And so this is talking about an extinction level event, and it may have been a nuclear war that happened upon the earth that wiped out the entire mankind, all plant life, all human life, everything. And God had to start all over again with Adam. Now, I just wanted to know what Doc Ram thought about that.
This is the 6th epoch of 8 epochs, the trial by fire. And I used to think it was electricity and nuclear energy, and now I realize it's about microwave band.
Well, there was another thing, too, I wanted to ask you about was, you talked about hollow earth. That's actually in the scriptures. Now, if you realize that there was technology way back then that advanced, even farther advanced than we probably are, because I think it was by Steeler Energetics. I think it was the zero gravity free energy that they were using back then. So I don't think they were actually more advanced than we are right now. And so if you go to Job chapter 26, verse 7, and you see it says, "Over the earth was an empty place." This is what it says. This is how it actually reads in Job 26, verse 7. It says, "And he stretches out the north from the empty place." So it's telling us that there was hollow earth way, in the Bible. And it also talks about in Job chapter 41, it's talking about a nuclear submarine. You read that, they had nuclear submarine technology during the time of Job. They were entering this underground base in hollow earth that the Nazis didn't build. It was built by the ancient Hebrews because they're the ones who had this ancient technology way back then. I just want to know what you thought about that.
Well, I taught at Shiprock in New Mexico at the Navajo Community College, and I remember a good friend of mine, who was a full professor there, talked about the giants that used to hunt and eat men. The Anunnaki and the Nephilim are all mentioned in the Bible. They're finding artifacts with other kinds of mammals that existed before man and are predicted after man. And the concern I have right now is what Vela and others are talking about, and the so-called black goo, a nanite form of rebuilding biological processes. I know that I don't know. I'm a good enough physicist that the military still uses me to run possibilities across my desk on where we're going with something. And my concern now is no longer turning the switches off on all the leaking Daiichi-like reactors, the GE reactors. We're not taking care of business. And there's not going to be a seventh epoch for anything human if we don't start paying attention today. Now, there have always been survivors, always, in the Bible. They talk about survivors that crawl out of a cave or out of a whale, whatever. We're in trouble. And we don't know it, and we don't see it, and our Congress is so ineffectual as to be this designated survivor that came on TV was that series was absolutely nailed exactly what's going on with the Democratic and Republican parties. And today, the Republican is no longer a Republican any more than a Democrat is a Democrat as I knew it and went to college. It's all different today. And they're advocating violence and the political things. So Pelosi coming in right after Trump, and who had the higher ratings? It isn't about who has the higher ratings. It's not about politics. It's the distinction between ethics and morals. And I'll just remind you, it was Ducky Mallard in NCIS that said, "An ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife. A moral man won't." What are we doing with microwave band technology? I have a concern, and I would be remiss if I didn't say so publicly.
Well, how about the Ezekiel 38:39? I've been warning people that there is going to come an attack from China and Russia from outer space. It's going to be a Pearl Harbor attack. I've been warning people for a lot of years this is what's coming. And I've just seen, I know that the higher echelons, like Vincent was talking about, they do know what's going to happen. The other people are really dumbed down by their dumb phones. They're locked in some type of grid in their mind. But the, they'll launch an attack, And, it shouldn't be a surprise, but I think it will be a surprise for a lot of people. Because I'm going to say what the Lord's told me, and that is Russia will take out 20 cities in the North American continent with the detonation of hydrogen bombs. And you have to understand, when the hydrogen bomb was detonated in the 1950s, it was only 1% of the nuclear fission. So now they've got 85% of that fission.
Mark, we're going into a break. Would you like to hold through the break?
Yeah, I'll hold.
Class, the Federal Communications Commission regulates all interstate communications. Satellite, cable, wire, and international communications originating or terminating in the United States. At the head of the FCC are 5 commissioners appointed by the president, and they serve for 5 years, and they are confirmed by the Senate. Radio and television broadcasters they're required to obtain a license, permission from the government, because according to American law, we the villagers, own the airwaves. The Federal Communications Commission issues these licenses and is in charge of regulating the airwaves. It is my belief and the belief of others that the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, is the most controlled organization within the government corporation. Mark, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I think that the FCC, I think they're doing experiments like within the last 5 or 6 years where they're able to shut down all of the communications grid. They got, they've got the finger on the button. They can just hit that and boom, everything's gone. Internet, everything.
I can tell you that Barry Soetoro demanded an internet kill switch. I can tell you that over-the-air broadcasters have a box in the radio stations. I'm talking about radio stations. I'm not sure about television, but I'm pretty sure that would apply as well, that they have a box that is connected ultimately to the government corporation where they can make announcements and take over all transmissions.
Oh, yeah. I pioneered my first television station when I was in my early 20s, about 25. It was a 5 million watt station with a tower here in Illinois.
Wait, 5 million?
Yeah, it's a
what
5 million watt. Yeah, 5 million watts. It's twice the size of WLS in Chicago. Our tower is it's out here in the country. Here in Illinois, it's like the size of the John Hancock building in Chicago, same height.
And what was this transmission of 5 million watts doing? What was the signal?
UHF.
UHF television. I thought television stations were in the. I thought television stations were in the 50,000 watt neighborhood.
No, this is 250,000. These were Christon tubes, 250,000 a piece. And so they came from West Germany at that time because it was West Germany. And it's 5 million watts on the UHF and band, and it covers actually about 120 miles. But if it's getting a skip, it can get way out there. I mean, it can get.
The problem is the earth fence that they're discussing now and going to start building will require a 5G tower every 2,000 feet.
Well, can't the 5G...
whole thing is going to be like a giant microwave oven.
Yeah, but wouldn't really be 5G? Really would be the telephone poles. Every telephone pole.
That is exactly what they're proposing. And the whole thing is called a recycle, just like your automobile made from plastic. We're doomed if we don't stop this thing now.
Let's get into this in a little more detail when we come back on the other side. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Mark in Illinois is holding on. Mark said something that was astonishing to me. He mentioned that they were using or building a television station using the UHF frequency in Illinois, and it was 5 million watts. He's absolutely right. Yes, they built television transmitters of 5 million watts. Now, a typical television station might be 50,000 watts or 100,000 watts. 5 million watts. I just want to give you a mental image of what 5 million watts is. At 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which is really low cost of electricity in the United States, 5 million watts would cost $500 an hour to operate that transmitter. Now, that's assuming 100% efficiency, and you can never achieve 100% efficiency. So these numbers are low, very low, to operate that transmitter. Just the transmitter. Forget the rest of the building and the programming. Just the transmitter. $500 an hour. $12,000 a day. $360,000 a month. And $4,320,000 a year just for the electricity. Staggering amount of power. Now, just think if you live in that neighborhood, what that would be like. Just think about what that does to the wildlife. Just think about the birds, the small animals, and the people.
That's nothing.
And the weather.
Just to keep an aircraft in the air is $10,000 an hour. How many aircraft are in the air at any given moment on Earth right now? And it's $10,000 an hour for fuel. You say it's beyond the imagination. It's gone to the point where you have to presume we've been invaded by something. That is the only... I watch what they're doing in Congress with Democrats and Republicans. What has happened to common sense?
Okay. I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And I'm thinking about how we're going to cook the planet. Because what we're talking about, when we talk about these 5G dangers, so we can have faster internet. Rick and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is these short-length microwaves that are required for 5th generation communications are very short, and the frequencies don't go very far. So we're really looking at an antenna every 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 feet. And these antennas don't transmit in the traditional way. So, class, if you have a walkie-talkie and you press the button, it will communicate with the person in front of you, behind you, in all directions, 360 degrees. Well, that's what you're thinking, right? Well, with these new 5G antennas, we're talking about these things are phased. They shoot a beam, and the beam is about a 4-inch square. And this beam will follow its target like a bullet. So this beam will follow you as you travel. It knows within 4 inches where you are. 4 inches up, 4 inches down, 4 inches forward, 4 inches backward, 4 inches left,
that's
4
the
inches
same,
right. It knows.
That's the same resolution that they now have in optics in space to determine the color of your eye.
Mark, any comments?
Yeah, I think that, the technology is all, I think it's been in play. I mean, whatever they, bring out, whatever they expose, it's probably been in play for quite a while. But I don't remember where I heard it or read it, but I read or heard it somewhere where all these just telephone poles are actually the 5G network. They don't have to build any towers. They just do it on the telephone poles. That's it.
Well, they'll need to re-rig the poles, of course, to transmit that kind of energy, because normal copper wire and the cable that's being used now is incapable of it. However, remember 9/11, and now remember what is happening this moment. The whole thing is on the neutron fullerene fusion bomb, the precision of nuclear detonation was at 1.4 nanometers. Now that is your 5G bandwidth. Now I'm telling you, it's as small as a water molecule, which is the smallest molecule that we know of in nature. You got helium. I'm talking about water with a dipole moment. It's so small that the distinction between capturing in what we call a carbon buckyball is 1.4 nanometers. And when you add that into 5G technology as the preferred bandwidth, you're talking about 1.4 nanometers in precision. Now, you tell me how you can hide from that in terms of facial recognition and the like. Right now, just this morning, I saw an article that is talking about an AI being able to tell what kind of genetic misinformation you have in your body based on your facial. They can say what genes
let's talk about this.
are wrong.
Can
talk about this for just a second.
An AI, yeah. That's when I was in high school, and we never had a concept of a computer like that. It was always relays. When UNIVAC was being built at the time I was building my linear accelerator, I remember they said, I wrote this sci-fi book about the sum of all of man's knowledge in this device, and they turned it on, and they asked it its first question, is there a God? And my response was, there is now. You have no idea how dangerous.
All right, Ricklet.
You have no idea. Stephen Hawking, we are talking about I just posted a thing from the guy that invented D-Wave technology out of Abbotsford 2 days ago on my website. And he's talking to his staff on the dangers of what we are about to do with this kind of technology. I am not talking about a person of interest anymore. That's old sci-fi. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just, I would be remiss if I did not, as a scientist, say something.
Let's talk about how dangerous this is. So, if you have a traditional cell phone, it operates on about the same frequency as a microwave oven. We said this before, so I'll say it quickly. You can put a hot dog in a microwave oven, set it to full power, and hit the start button, and within a minute your hot dog's cooked. You all know that. It's so hot you can't touch it, right? So it's cooked, that hot dog. You know that a cell phone is about 1 watt. A microwave oven might be 800, 900, 1,000 watts. So if you set your microwave oven on low, you could still cook that hot dog, but it would take longer. And that's what you're doing to your body when you use a cell phone. Now, 5G cell phones or phones will have about 10 times the power of a 4G cell phone.
Yeah, that's exponential. Just remember that. Exponential.
10 times more power. So you are cooking yourself 10 times more or 10 times faster. Now let's talk about directional focus of these wavelengths, these beams of radiation that are going to be coming your way in a 4-inch square. So imagine this, class. Now, this is radio, so it's going to be a little difficult, but let's make it simple. Imagine to your left, if you stretched out your arm out to the left, there's an antenna out there. Okay? It's on a power pole or a light pole. It's to your left. And you are right-handed. And you just happen to put your cell phone in your right hand and to your right ear. That 5G beam is going to have to go through your head to get to the phone. Let's say you turn 90 degrees to your right, and you're talking on your cell phone. You go, this thing's darn dangerous, so I'll use the speakerphone. So now you have the speakerphone held at chest height, and the antenna is behind you, okay? So you've got your back to the antenna. You're 100 feet away from the antenna, the light pole or the power pole. Your cell phone is at your chest, and you're looking down at it, and you're talking into your cell phone through its speaker. That wavelength, that 5G radiation is going right through your back. Right through your back, through your lungs, and reaching that 5G phone. And yet, the FCC is allowing this. Obviously, there's no way that anyone in his right mind would believe that the FCC has not been taken over. There's no way that I believe that the FCC is not bought and paid for by corporate communications companies. And they're going to kill us. I mentioned that these 5G signals will need to go through your body if your phone is on the other side of the antenna. Rick, am I exaggerating? Did I say anything wrong? Am I incorrect?
There is Dr. Beal, B-E-A-L, in Florida, has actually done medical studies on dosimetry, the radiation levels each organ in your body can handle. And it's well proven that 5G has an LD50 ratio on certain organs in your body. And at some point, they're burned out because of the damage that radiation does. Each organ is different. I used 10 megahertz. Now we're talking gigahertz now. I use 10 megahertz with blood flow in terms of a Doppler transducer. In other words, to be able to measure how fast the blood's going through an artery, I used 10 megahertz. I used 28 megahertz to do an aortic cross-section in echo, bouncing a signal off the aortic wall at 28 megahertz. Each organ in your body has dosimetry, where it's opaque and or will absorb that radiation to change the genetic code because of cancer, disruption of the normal processes. That's why an astronaut can't go into deep space. What we are essentially doing is bringing outer space down to the surface of Earth to simulate something that a sun might experience in the center of our particular galaxy. Grand Central, down near where the black hole is, the radiation is such, life as we know it cannot exist. That's why we're out here on the rim. And the atmosphere, the air between us and the Van Allen belt and the electromagnetic poles that we have are what shield and allow us to exist as a life form.
Okay,
this is absolute, from my point of view, we've been invaded because no scientist in his right mind condone this kind of exposuration. I mean, including Lockheed. So how does that work?
What you just described is DNA. I mean, what you're talking about is first, right?
Yeah, see, DNA is a much larger molecule than water. It's made with atoms. Get a grip. And our water is hydrogen and oxygen, number 1 and number 6. That's 3 of them. The DNA is how many different cell parts to it and atoms, and with a little lithium over here and a little barium down there and whatever. Now, get a grip. People don't understand. We're talking about pre-DNA bandwidth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I
want to say this. Donald Trump has multi-billions of dollars invested in communications. He holds multiple licenses with the FCC. So what's all that mean?
It's so convoluted that none of us, at the end of the day, will really ever know what happened. The Democrats and the Republicans, because there's 36 different genders now. This is crazy making.
All right,
and I have had enough, and I would be remiss if I didn't say something.
Let's bring this to reality right now. So,
the danger of microwave cannot be understated. That's why they say to step away from your microwave, because it attenuates. That means it gets absorbed by air, which means that 4 feet away is safer than 1 foot away by, 2 zeros. Now, when you put that kind of energy on the earth with a 4-inch bullseye going to every single thing, now you have a weapon, for example, that does paradise, takes the individual house out, and yet the shrubbery is left, and take out a part of the car and leave the other remaining.
When we come back, I'll tell you how strong a signal can be in your house with this technology. Class, you're not going to believe it. Okay, so here it goes. How dangerous are these 5G devices? Well, they'll communicate with satellites that'll be in low Earth orbit. And so a signal will be sent up to the satellite, back down to the transmitter and the antenna array that's on these power poles. And if you have one of these devices in your house, this same technology in your house, it will be about 300 watts in power, 300 watts. Now think about, so what does 300 watts mean? Well, you all remember those light bulbs that we stopped using, those 100-watt light bulbs, those 60-watt light bulbs, because they wasted energy, the incandescent light bulbs? Well, if you had a 100-watt light bulb and you left it on for a while and you just stuck your finger, you touched the top of it with your finger, you would burn your finger. So don't do that. Do not do that. You will burn your finger touching the top of a light bulb. It's hundreds of degrees in temperature. I'm talking about a 100-watt light bulb. We're now talking about using 300 watts, 3 times as much power, and beaming that to your device, to your phone, so it can follow you around the room. This is absolutely nuts. You can't touch the light bulb, but yet your government corporation is going to allow these phased antennas to follow you around with signals that are 150, as up to 150 times stronger than a 4G phone, or 300 watts for a stationary device such as a Wi-Fi hub in your home or office. Imagine that. You go to the doctor's office and you've got your new 5G cell phone. You're being cooked in the waiting room. You're being cooked wherever you walk, because that beam follows you. You'll be cooked outside. Rick, have I misstated anything?
Oh, no. It's all extremely understated.
All right. And how many satellites are we talking about, class? Rick, do you want to give us the number, or do you want me to?
Well, they're talking about 20,000, forming a little pinprick, kind of like Hellblazer. That's your metaphor.
Mark?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of during the time of Ronald Reagan and Star Wars technology, where they had this multiple checkerboard of satellites in space. Why couldn't they just use those?
Well, that's how they depict in science fiction when the alien comes in to take over Earth. In the sci-fi.
Well,
it's all happening in front of us. The terraforming, everything. Watch it. The trees in Oregon, every single ponderosa in Oregon is showing deep stress, and it is not from bark beetle or dehydration.
Mark, you mentioned, why can't we just use the satellites from Ronald Reagan's Star Wars?
Yeah,
why
Ronald Reagan's Star Wars.
Yeah,
why can't we just use those?
They used to call him Ronald Ray Gun, as in Ray Gun. Well,
yeah, well, that's where I live in Eureka, Illinois, and this is where Ronald Reagan went to college.
Why use these satellites at all? Because we can't escape them. You know, back when we had those 10 and 12-foot dish antennas, there was a map of the United States with a coverage map, like the footprint of the satellites. And I'm talking about HBO and Showtime, you know, that kind of thing, back in late 1970s, early 1980s. Well, the signal was so weak that you needed to get a large parabolic reflector that could catch that signal and focus it in like a pinpoint area, which would be the feed horn of that satellite dish antenna, because the signal is weak. We're talking about a signal that is so strong that you don't need one of those dish antennas to focus the signal from the satellite. They're going to be on every power pole in cities, every light pole in cities. They're going to be every 100, 200, 300 feet. The signal is so strong that even these little tiny boxes that will contain the antenna and the rest of the electronics can pick up that signal. That's how much power we're talking about. It's an enormous amount of power. I'm surprised that the Earth-friendly activists among us aren't screaming like, where's all this electricity going to come from? It's another point.
Well, you mentioned something about aliens. Somebody wanted to get you off the air, because you were talking about aliens. But, I do believe that there is I know this for a fact. I don't know how to explain it. I'm going to try my best. But I know that there's people walking among us that are not human beings. They're walking in human bodies, but they're evil spirits. And they don't have a soul, of course, because they're spirit. They're I don't know how to describe it to you, but they're spiritual beings, and they're inhabiting a human body, and they're soulless because they're spirit, and they're evil. And
let me ask this question.
There is a conspiracy to destroy human life throughout the entire planet, especially those of us who are Hebrews, those of us that are Israel and are the race of the Hebrew race. There is a outright plan to wipe us out. Okay,
I was talking with a priest, back probably in the 90s. We attended a Roman Catholic church in the Commonwealth of Virginia on the East Coast, and he would come visit us. He was a friend of the family. And I asked him, I said, Father, is it possible that God is an alien? And he created everything and put us on this planet, created us, and said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you everything you need. It's all right here. Some I'm going to tell you. The rest you're going to have to figure out for yourself. It's all right here. Here you go. And I'll come back later and check on you and see how well you're doing. It stumped him. It absolutely stumped him. So I'm not being blasphemous. I'm just saying, could God be an alien? And why not? What makes us think that God is not an alien? And I don't mean that in a defamatory way. What I mean is from someplace else, not Earth.
God is the essence of all creation. I mean, you think about time, space-time, and where there is no time, because there's different dimensions with God. You got to go back to the books of Enoch. There's 366 books of Enoch. There's not just one. And so Enoch, and we're on the Enochian calendar. The calendar that we follow is the calendar of Enoch, but the Hebrew month begins in Aries for Ram. And so, I am is the Lord God of Israel, the name Jehovah, Yahweh, and he's everywhere.
Getting back to the radiation, so we're talking about everyone. Everyone will be irradiated with millimeter-size, non-ionizing radiation every second of every minute of every hour of every day of every year until it gets shut down. We're talking about cooking everyone and everything, both living and non-living. If it has moisture in it, it will be cooked. Is that correct, Dr. Richard Allen Miller? If it has moisture,
well, water,
it will be cooked.
the bandwidth we're looking at, it's the same level as a molecule of water. That's in carbon. The carbon spacing is 1.4 nanometers, and it's just enough that when you have a ball of carbon, you can put a single water molecule inside that cavity. Now, between molecules of carbon, atoms of carbon. And the problem is, like Enoch, you talked about Enoch. The reason that Bible, those set of writings, scripture, were left out of the Constantinople Bible was because of the Lemegeton, the 72 fallen angels, and the fact that it gave you the name of them. And that's Rumpelstiltskin. When you have the name of the demon, you have control of it. That's why exorcism is a journey to discover the name. Now, I have my own sense of this as a scientist, and there is absolutely no question. There's something else going on, whether you choose to see it as evil walking around in human form, whether you see it as a metaphor, which the Greek did. That was their technology. They saw everything as archetypes. And there were 22 stories in the big city, and you were either possessed or complexed. And the idea was, if you had more than one story, if you could identify that story, you could change the movie. Because each story, like Psyche at the Well of Souls, has an ending.
Well, there's a Wall of Souls, a pyramid of Giza, Wall of Souls.
I decided when I came out of graduate school, the first thing I did was I learned Old Hebrew and Greek. And I did my own translation. I studied with Gershom Scholem. He required, I speak Old Hebrew. That, by the way, was the erection of the trapezoid, which I have put around myself as a psychic self-defense thing. There's more going on here than anybody realizes, and in my opinion, we've been invaded.
Okay, we come back. I'd like to attempt to connect two dots. And I'd like to get Dr. Richard Allen Miller's opinion and Mark's opinion about what I'm going to say when we come back. And what are we talking about? Of course, we're talking about cancer. We're talking about, well, we already have these, but we're going to have more of them. We have headaches, weakness. We have the inability to learn, inability to reason. We have chest pains, brain fog. We have that already, but we're going to have more of that. Well, here's the question I have for you, gentlemen, and Rick, I'd like to hear your response first. I believe that there is a link between 22 long rifle cartridges disappearing across the country. For years, they were hard to get. You could not get a 22 long rifle cartridge for your handgun or your rifle, no matter what. It was unobtainium. Okay? Now, I believe that the technology that we are deploying, the 5G, has the ability to kill us individually because of our unique identification on each cell phone. So each cell phone has a unique identifier. That's how come you receive that call rather than your neighbor or someone in another state. So your cell phone has a unique identifier. We'll call it a phone number for the broadcast purposes. But just to make sure that we kill the right person, we've got voice recognition technology. So you could borrow someone's phone, but with your voice not tying to that unique identifier of that smartphone, well, maybe they won't kill you because you borrowed the phone. But there's also facial recognition and fingerprint recognition. So if you have one of these great new smartphones that has facial recognition, fingerprint recognition, voice recognition, unique identifier, that phone can follow you around and within a couple weeks maybe kill you.
Brainwave technology for identification now.
So here's the question, or here's my connecting the dots theory. 22 long rifles were taken out because a lot of people have 22 long rifle handguns and rifles, and they can sit in their windows and just plink away and take out these little transmission devices, 5G. I think that there is a connection between not being able to buy 22 cartridges and these kinds of technologies, cameras, spy technology, tracking technology, and when the people have finally had it, they'll take out their guns and start plinking at 5 cents per shot and destroying billions of dollars worth of spy technology. Rick Miller, what is your thought about what I just said?
Imagination is reality. If you can conceive of it, it is not only true, but even more.
Okay, Mark, your thoughts.
Well, I just wanted to say what he talked about earlier before the break, and that is, I think the person, you have to have the shield of David, and the shield of David is the Word of God. It's the only thing that's going to be able to protect you, and that's going to create a shield around you because it is your DNA. And it's the only thing that can shield us from all of this, technology that is destructive. And they won't put safeguards into it because they don't want them, because then they'd be liable. But I just want to say thank you for, having me on the program today, and just want to say peace and blessing for both of you, okay? Peace.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark.
No, thank you. It's a nice thing. I could use it.
Rick, I really believe that there is a link between the 22 long rifles, the cartridges, and the technology that's being deployed, because it's so easy when people when they lose their loved ones to cancers and other diseases and maladies, and they finally figure out what's going on, that they've purchased these tracking devices that allow us to be killed with these millimeter frequencies. I think they're going to lose their patience, and I think they're going to go on a rampage.